Hello, hello, hello. It's Stephanie here again, and it's HMO Heroes live at 5. And we have got a fantastic show again tonight with Milesh Lakhani joining us, who's just recently gone into property and has a superb 20-unit HMO deal, which I know that you're going to love when we get down into it. Now, just before we dig into that fantastic story, let me tell you about HMO Heroes, just in case you don't know about us. We're an HMO. We're a Facebook group. So if you're not a member yet, do join over at Facebook. Google HMO Heroes and join the group. It's all about motivation, inspiration, and information for anyone interested, active, or experienced already in HMOs. So back to tonight, and as I mentioned, we've got Milesh Lakhani joining us, and Milesh is a bundle of energy and can-do positive attitude. After a serious illness, he sort of changed his life radically after 17 years as a senior corporate employee in pensions. He changed his life around and decided that he was going in HMOs, and he went in big, and in just a few months he bought 4 HMOs. Now this is all within the last 2 years, and now just 2 years into his property journey, he's completed just this week on a massive commercial property which he has achieved planning to convert into an HMO, a 20-unit HMO. And I put some of the figures for you to see. It has a GDV, let me get this right, of £650,000. He's buying and refurbing for £470,000, and he'll be grossing rents of over £100,000 a year. So a really amazing deal, and I think quite interesting for us to learn a bit more about. So if you have any questions as we go through this tonight, please do ask them in the comments. If you're online with me now, do give me a thumbs up. And without any further ado, let me welcome to the show HMO hero Milesh Lakhani. Hi, Milesh.
Hi, Stephanie. Hi, everyone.
Hello, hello. I can see we've got a few people on with us, so I'll say hi to you guys in a moment. So how are you doing, Milesh?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Fantastic. And let's dive in with you and just start off with how you got started in property. I sort of gave a brief overview.
Yeah. So I've always had an interest in property. So I bought my first property back in 2002. And as you mentioned, I had a pretty significant kind of health scare about 5 years ago, just over 5 years ago. And that really kind of woke me up to life in terms of, what I wanted with family and flexibility and all that sort of stuff. And the corporate job, whilst it was very, very good, wasn't kind of cutting the mustard really. So took a decision to put a plan together to leave the job. And did so in October 2016, almost to the day 2 years ago.
Fantastic. Well, I just want to say thank you. Thanks for that. And I just want to say a quick hi to Chadney and Steve, who I can see. I can't see the other names at the moment of the people who are watching, but thanks for being with us live. So Milesh, let's jump in, because you then started in property, and you just dived straight in and started and bought 4 HMOs. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so given what we wanted to achieve and our focus being income initially, following some education and some kind of understanding of the market, HMOs, because of the income returns, was our preferred strategy. Fortunately, I had a couple of buy-to-lets already, so in terms of lending, that didn't cause a huge issue. And I guess one of the biggest challenges was finding the right area. But once I understood all of the kind of legislation around HMOs, then kind of decided, right, this is what we want to do, and went forward. So the first property purchase was in March 2016, followed by the next three within probably just over 12 months of each other, 14 months of each other. Yeah.
That's pretty crazy. And it's even crazier when I found out that you were, is it 4 hours drive?
Yes, that's right.
4 hours drive away. So tell us what you were doing, how many viewings you needed, how many offers you were putting in typically, and all of that sort of stuff, because it's quite...
Yeah, so that's where what I call the graft comes in. So given that, you know, our strategy was HMOs and to do conversions, and in order to do that, you need to be buying at the right price for us. That does tend to be below the market value. So in order to get, you know, the 1, 2, 3, 4 deals that we got, initially, whilst I was working, I was up there every weekend, cramming in between 10, 15 viewings in a day, getting ready with the offers, doing all your numbers as best as you could, and then offering early part of the following week. So at any one point, I think the maximum offers I had out at one time was between 20 and 25. Wow. So you can imagine if you work back from 25 offers, that's a hell of a lot of viewings, lots of analysis on numbers and stuff before you can get your offers out. And of those, you know, the odd 1 or 2 will come good.
So what were you doing? Was it a spreadsheet? How were you keeping the track of everything with so many balls in the air?
Just good analysis tool. So initially started with Excel, just built a spreadsheet that told me when I did the viewings, what the maximum offer could be, strategy on pricing and how to offer, and when to offer. But the key thing, if anyone, you know, if there's one tip I could give on that, it really is to make sure that you follow up. 3 out of the 4 deals that I got in that time were through follow-ups. Every 2 weeks I was calling out to all the agents, just understanding what's new to the market, what's happened to that property I offered on a couple of weeks back, is it still going as it should be or not. And fortunately I was one of the first people they called up when it did fall through, and you know, they accepted the offer.
Yeah, it's interesting you should say that, because it's exactly what Ben was saying. Ben Goldsmith from last week was just saying it's all about the following up, and he bought a lot of heavy volume of properties in a short period of time as well. And going back to you just starting out, it was your first HMO, and I know that some people have had difficulty financing, but then you were buying as a C3, weren't you? And
yeah.
You didn't have those problems of buying HMOs. But let's move on then to the refurbishments.
Okay, so
yeah,
go on.
No, I was just going to say, what can you say about that?
Yeah, so the refurbishments were, for me, if I'm honest, initially the hardest bit for me, because I didn't have a huge understanding, knowledge base on building work, refurbishment works. So on the first one, looking back in hindsight, wonderful thing. I think I could have done better there. What happened on the first one is I put myself under some time pressure to try and get the refurbishment done by a certain point. And looking back, there was no huge need to do that. But the result of that was I, by default, refined the number of builders that I could get into quote, because I was fixed on my timescale. Whereas had I not been, it would have opened up a lot more builders who would have had the scope to do the work later. And then just things like VAT, where you're doing a refurbishment, if the property's been empty for a period of time, then you only pay a reduced rate of VAT. Finding a builder that will support that and understand that is something that's a must now. Because obviously there's a saving for you. Yes, there's a bit of work for them to do in terms of reclaiming and that type of thing, but it makes a significant difference on our refurbishment costs. One thing I found again with the first guy was really good in terms of reporting back. I'd get regular pictures. There was a really clear project plan that we'd talk about every week before payment was made. and then that approach I adopted with all of the other properties, and the builder that I used for the last 3 eventually got the hang of that.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. And you said as well that you paid a little more for your refurb to get it done quickly, but actually it still came in really keenly at price, I thought. But could you just walk us through example of the numbers on those calls? So tell us about the first one.
Yeah, so the first one was on for 100,000 and we purchased that for 81. And then with your buying costs and everything else, the refurb came in at about 14,000 on that one. Whereas I think it was probably could have done it within around 10. So not the end of the world. The numbers still worked on the 14k. So we were all in with your fees and everything else and planning permissions and stuff for just under 100,000. And then the refinance was done at 120,000. So that meant we got lending of 90 grand, which meant that we didn't have much money left in the deal. Income wise, we average about £95 a week per room. And that was a 3-bed mid-terrace property, which we converted to a 4-bed HMO. So with the rents, the rents were about £1,500 a month or thereabouts after your management fees and your bills and so on. We're roughly about £750 a month.
Nice. So a nice property, and then the other 3 are quite similar to that you were saying. Yeah,
the 3 of the 4 are 3 beds into 4-bed HMOs, and then the last, or the other one, is a 6-bed detached place, which is a 6-bedroom HMO. So similar numbers, but just different proportions, obviously, because of the size of the rooms.
So there you were doing a kind of typical, and maybe a bit faster than typical, but kind of standard HMOs, and then you've gone from there to buying this huge commercial property and now got planning for 20 HMOs. What made you take that leap? What's the mind thinking behind?
So as you do in any business, you review your strategy and where you're heading and what you've achieved and what you want to do going forward. And one of the things that I identified was actually capital strategy is something that we need to start deploying, and started to do that. Although that was in my local area, not up in my investment area, which is up north, which generally gives you income over capital. However, just by chance came across this building, which actually a residential estate agent who I'd used in the past contacted me about, and said, would you be interested? So I said yes, had a look at it, understood kind of commercial stuff to a certain extent. From here, went up and had a look. If I'm honest, my original intention was to do a conversion into 1-bed flats and sell on. And then HMO was the kind of secondary exit strategy should the flats not have worked. So did quite a lot of research on both strategies before offering, and demand was obviously critical. So spent quite a bit of time doing that on the flat side. HMOs I was more comfortable with because I'd done it. And it turned out that the demand for the 1-bed units just weren't there. Now, that was a tough pill to swallow, because actually when I said demand wasn't there, there was nothing on the market. And despite talking to agents who were telling me that they just don't come on the market, they weren't telling me that there's no demand, but they weren't coming on the market. So by default, it's quite a high risk to be the first out there, to go down that route with quite a big initial outlay, and then you could end up with them, and then the rental returns you'd probably just cover yourself rather than make anything from it. And I'll go on to the numbers later, but it'll give you an idea of kind of the risk factor on that. As I said, HMOs is what I knew. Did some work with the local authority around feasibility and that type of thing, and then went forward on that basis.
Yeah.
As a big HMO, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm surprised at that whole demand thing with the 1-bed flats, because that's normally in most areas that there is, you know, great demand for one bed.
Yeah.
But in that area, you knew that there was great demand for the HMOs.
Correct. Yeah.
So that's why you went down that road. And obviously the numbers have worked amazingly. So tell us, let's start off. So you arrive and you see it for the first time. What's it like, and what were your thoughts at that stage?
Well, compared to the biggest house we bought, 6-bed, it was big. You kind of walk in and it's like, wow, okay. You know, I actually got lost in there, not knowing where I was the first couple of times I went in. Yeah. So to give you an idea, it was a 5,000 square foot building over 2 floors. It was an office building with various individual offices. You know, a kind of small kitchen space. There was like a big meeting room. Or there is a big meeting room provision in there, and just some basic kitchen facilities. So it took a while to kind of visualize what I wanted it to be, but got there in the end, to be honest. And the other thing for HMOs, and those that are involved in HMOs will understand that parking is a big factor. And what I guess one of the deciding factors on this is behind the site, which is on a main road, there are 16 parking spaces. Yeah. So initially I was going in for 16-bed HMO, and then talking to my architect, looking at the plans, actually comfortably we could get 20 bedrooms in. And it was felt that, you know, even at 1 parking space per HMO, you know, that what we've got is sufficient. So there was no parking issue whatsoever, which was a big change to what we're used to with the terraces and that type of house.
Exactly. No, that's phenomenal. And I know that it's it was a complex story just getting it over the line. Did you find that, you know, whereas with HMOs there might be a lot of other competition on the buying front, did you find that with this commercial that, you know, you have a lot more room for negotiation or not?
Well, what I did know is that the site had been empty for a little while, and it had been on the market for quite a while. So to me, that kind of said that the demand for commercial space is limited. And when I originally saw the site in early January, the first trip after Christmas, I went up. That's when I originally viewed it. And then there was no contact for about 2 to 3 weeks, when I actually got a follow-up from the agent, which I understand from a commercial agent perspective is not massively common. So that was a bit of a trigger for me, and I thought, actually, yeah, maybe there is some legs in this in terms of negotiation. So we viewed the property in January, and the offer got accepted early Feb on that one. But I did buy it with you know, on my terms, so to speak. So I can go into a bit of detail on that.
Tell us about that, because that was
So because obviously the site needed planning, we offered on the basis that we exchange contracts as soon as possible with a minimal deposit. I'll come back to that in a minute, and then exchange contracts which kind of locks both parties in, and then we complete conditional to planning permission. So I've exchanged contracts, got the commitment from the vendors, go away and get planning permission, and then the way that the contract was written was, as soon as we got satisfactory planning permission, completion would take place 10 working days after that. So that's what we did. So the offer accepted in February, early Feb, and it wasn't until the end of Feb, the last week of Feb, that we actually got the heads of terms agreed. So again, if you're doing something slightly different, then it's really important that you make sure that those heads of terms are absolutely, you know, accurate, and there's no room for error, room for manoeuvre in there. So it just gives you an idea. It took best part of 3 weeks to get that agreed, going backwards and forwards between agent and vendors and that type of thing.
And solicitors.
And solicitors, yeah. So going back to the exchange, I wanted to exchange with a minimal deposit of £1, which you hear all these stories about buildings being bought for £1. Well, actually, it didn't wash with these guys. They wanted a 10% deposit, But my argument back to that was actually, I'm putting quite a bit of financial commitment in myself, in funding the architect fees and all the other fees that go with the planning permission. So we negotiated down and actually paid a 5% refundable deposit. So the risk to me would have been, had we not got planning permission, then I would have lost my architect fees and that type of thing, but deposit would have come back. So it was relatively low risk, relatively speaking.
I love
certainly a lot less risk than buying the thing and then finding out that you can't get planning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the other thing, because you're going in for commercial, you're going in for something different, you're going in for something where you've had to have that imagination, that vision to see forward. You're in a more rarefied market that fewer players are on the field, and that gives you more opportunity. And the fact that also it's been empty for a while, it means that they're possibly more open to keeping it aside for you, sort of thing, because there wasn't that huge sort of demand. That's brilliant. And then you got the planning through. And how long altogether did the planning take?
So the planning application went in just after exchange, so early July. And the typical planning process is that they come back to you within 56 days. I got a response just after that. And the local councillor wanted it to go to planning committee. And again, found that out 3 or 4 days before the committee meeting date, which was early October. So only 3 weeks ago. So that was a bit of a shock in terms of that timescale. And the committee process is that you get the applicant or the agent gets 3 minutes within which to speak about the application and their pros towards it and why it should be granted, and then it goes to the committee, then have a discussion and then determine whether to approve or not. So that was quite challenging and quite nerve-wracking, as you can imagine. But I actually had to go to committee pretty much to the day in 2017 over one of the 3-bed houses that we bought. And there was quite a challenge with that one. It did get through, but I was expecting a similar challenge. And actually the reaction I got was the opposite, which was fantastic. There are only 2 out of the 20 or so councillors who didn't vote for the application. And the rest did, and they were commending the way that it's been put together, the design of it, the location of the building and stuff. So I walked away quite happy that day.
Yeah, magic 3 minutes, because you were telling me that if you went a moment over 3 minutes, a bell would go off or an alarm.
That's right. Yeah, I ran out of time again. I only had 1 line left this time, but I ran out of time, wasn't able to finish. But the local councillor, if they want to go up and speak, they get 5 minutes, which I think is a bit unfair. But it is. But you got them with your 3 minutes. We got there. We got them. Yeah.
3 minutes, and but you're saying that you think what it was the plans that you had for the building. So that's
and the design. And a lot of people could relate to the building because they'd either worked there or knew people who worked there because of the location of it and what it was beforehand and that type of thing. So they could relate to the fact that, yes, it has been empty for almost 2 years. And there's clearly no commercial demand for it. Otherwise, it would have been sold already.
Exactly.
HMO, given the location of it, local amenities, the footfall it will bring into the town, it's kind of ideal, really.
Yeah, so let's just walk through then. Let's go over the numbers now. So we've talked a bit about how you brought it all together. And let me say hi to Anand and Bindia. Thanks for joining us. And if you have any questions, just put them in the comments as we go along. So fire away then, Milesh.
So purchase price for this one, asking price was $295 originally. We purchased it for $220,000 and completed on Monday. So that was good. Stamp duty, so commercial stamp duty, people may not be aware that the commercial stamp duty is actually less than what you pay for residential stamp duty. And the nice bonus that I got as well on this one was in Wales, the stamp duty land tax is calculated slightly differently. So there was a saving there of about £700 on the stamp duty. So in total, I paid £700 stamp duty on the property, which compared to residential is pretty slim to none, really. So that's good result. Refurbishment, just as we've completed this week, I have gone through all of the numbers again, as I've got a bit more concrete kind of quotations, which I'm still in the process of finalising. So the refurbishment expected is around 300,000, which means that all in with the buy-in fees and the like, it will be costing around £520,000. So that's kind of money in. In terms of what the GDV is going to be, average rents are likely to be £110 a week for the rooms, and 17 of the 20 bedrooms will be ensuite. So 3 people will be sharing a shower room, and £110 a week, which gives us monthly 9,500. So I should know this.
Bad, is it?
Yeah, so it's about 115k, just under.
Yeah.
Rent.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So the GDV expected, based on those rentals, as it's going to be a commercial calculation, is around 720,000.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So it's coming in the middle of where it's coming higher than you actually originally thought. The GDV.
Yes. Yeah. And that's based on some research analysis I did with myself and my letting agent on, what's reasonable. I always tend to stay on the cautious side when it comes to the forecasts and estimating of numbers. Exactly. So it's worth revalidating, because originally I did all my numbers on I think £95 or £100 a week, but actually, local analysis is telling me that 110 is fairly safe. Given that they're going to be new, they're going to have, most of them have ensuite, so an average of 110 is pretty good.
Yeah. Even the councillors were impressed with them. That's how good they are.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
So you tell us about how the financing works, because obviously that's the thing, that's a barrier for a lot of people who want to go from what the type of deal that you were doing before with 4 or 5 bedrooms up to these mega deals where it's you're on commercial and in this case 20 rooms. How does the financing work for that?
So on this one, all of my due diligence on whether it's a house or whether it's commercial stuff is all based on bridging finance or development finance. Again, it builds a bit of a buffer in, but for this one, I've been fortunate enough that actually the amount of development finance I'm going to need is fairly small, because I'm working with a number of investors who are fixed in for a 12-month period, and have used some of our own kind of proceeds from revaluations and that type of thing. So it's a bit of a combination of my own money, investor finance, and a little bit of development finance as well.
Perfect. And do you mind me asking how much you are offering the investors on this one?
Between 6 and 8.
Loans? Sorry, is it loans?
Yeah, it's loans. Yeah. So it's a fixed rate between 6 and 8% for a 12-month period.
A fantastic deal for them then as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And we liken ourselves to the banks because in the banks these days your rates aren't that good, and as I like to say, safe as houses.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, we've got a comment. Thanks for this one, Tina. Tina says, great story, learning lots from this. Hope all goes well with your latest project, Milesh.
Thank you, Tina.
That's fabulous. Okay, and tell us now about, moving forward, you're looking at your build and your construction, and how are you sort of structuring that? Because that's another part that maybe would put people off who want to step up to this sort of level of deal.
Yeah, so I think on the build side, as you would with residential, really, but I guess more emphasis on it is make sure you get a range of builder types, so companies to one-man bands and that type of thing, to give you a real mix and variation of what or how it could be built and how it could be done. And then you assess the risks. So, I've used the same builder on the last 3 houses, but I know that he's just not got the capacity to deal with something of this size. So I've actually gone out to 4 different companies, and I'm pretty sure which one I'm going to go with, but I'm just waiting for one more quote to come back. And then the other key is to make sure that you're asking for like, because there's nothing worse than looking at 4 different quotes with 4 different sets of requirements, because you're just not going to get any consistency from it. So it's really important that you know what you want, right down to the individual finishing, what color carpets you want, what thickness of underlay you want, what your kitchens are going to look like, the paint you want, all that sort of stuff. If the more you can think of and the more you can get down on paper up front, the better that's going to be, because what you get back from a quotation from a builder is going to be much more accurate. They do like to put PC sums in, which are inevitable. So for kitchens and that type of thing, they will put in a sum, which is to be clarified as you go further down the build. But if you're really, really specific, your drawings are accurate enough that they can then go and get accurate quotes, then that's what you want. Before you sign anything, the trick is to try and get as little PC sums in there as you can and get as much clarified as you can.
Because for you it'll be the first time, or is it the first time that you've done this sort of a building contract?
To this size, yeah.
Are you using some sort of template? Because there must be something that you would forget if you've not done it before. And then I've heard that the cost for any changes once the contract is delivered is quite expensive. So how are you sort of managing that risk?
So I've invested in some education on commercials, which has really helped and come good. The other thing as well is I've got a coach. So somebody who's kind of been there and done that, coach stroke mentors, it's proved really, really useful to me. So you've got that advice, you've got that sounding board, and you've got the accountability as well. So that's something that I've started also doing now, is helping people to progress in whatever goals that they want to kind of achieve, not just property related, but kind of personal performance, that type of stuff that they've got. So I think those couple of things have really helped, because it gives you a bit of a comfort blanket is probably the right way of putting it. And I think the variation and getting 3 or 4 builders quotes also helps you to validate. And if there's stuff that one's missed off, then you're more than likely that one of the other 3 is going to have covered it. So that they're probably the 2 or 3 things I've done to de-risk. There's always going to be a you don't know what you don't know, but the lower you can keep that, the better it will be for all parties.
Well, the pictures of it look already, and I really look forward to seeing it as it goes through. So you'll have to come back on and tell us how it goes. We've had a couple of people come on. That's it. Hi, thanks for your comment. And Steve Amber has asked, what differences do you see between commercial and residential refurb, e.g. commercial could have iffy materials like asbestos or unusual services like water arrangements?
Yeah, so they are really good.
Sorry.
They're really good examples of. So one of the things that one of the builders is going to do is talk to the water company to see what capacity we've got for water coming in. Services, all of those things are considerations. As far as asbestos and that type of thing go, then there's massive value in getting all of these reports done as soon as you can. So we had asbestos reports actually that were done quite recently by the vendor. So as part of the conveyancing process, we made sure that we had sight of that, and I showed the people that needed to see it, i.e. the builders, as and when we got to it. And also when the builders come round, they'll kind of prompt you with these type of things. And again, I was fortunate because the building was empty. I was able to do that and get people round before we'd actually bought the place. So it just helped to accelerate the quality of the quotes that I'm now getting through. Because if I completed this week and then gone out to builders, it would have just burnt loads and loads more time.
Yeah.
But great question and good considerations.
So what tips, going back, would you give to people? What do you wish you had known at the start that you know?
Blimey, that's a really good question. I think just knowing your end game is really important. Start with the end in mind, because and it's important to have a couple of exit strategies. And I guess the other thing is don't get too emotional over it, because if you fall in love with something and it's not going to work out how you want it to, it can be quite easy to try and make it fit and try and tweak the number so it does work. So try and remain as objective as you can in doing so. And then, because there is a bit of a step between residential and commercial, is just make sure you've got people around you that do know it, because that's really, really important, because small investment in that will save you thousands and thousands going forward.
Yeah. And you mentioned that since you started coaching, you actually started coaching because people were approaching you, weren't they, to work with you? They'd heard what you've done and they wanted to work with you. And so tell us about that and how.
Yeah, so I guess one of the things, moving from a big corporate job to kind of working for yourself on your own, is that people element. And it took me a little while to appreciate this, really, probably about a year or so. I mean, initially it was really difficult anyway, I found, for the first few months, because, you kind of go from a real strict routine that you've had for lots and lots of years to being in control of your own destiny. And, it was some days quite easy to not do much and not feel the impact of that. So that was kind of an initial kind of learning. But as time went on, one of the things that I really missed was seeing that people element and the development of people. So performance management processes, or whatever, different companies call it different things. We used to have a twice yearly meeting where I'd sit down with all my managers and management team and say, right, what have we achieved in the last 6 months? And actually just seeing them realize that they have achieved stuff that they didn't think they had was actually a really nice feeling, whether I was involved in it or not. And I guess that was the gap that I wanted to fill, that I'd recognized, and kind of coaching does that for me.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, I know they'll get a lot of value from that, from working with you. Now, the other thing that we talked about, and I wonder if you could shed some light for people, if people are remote HMO investors, like you are with the 4 HMOs that you bought in the last few months, in the last few years, and you've had a lot of experience now with what's happened with letting agents. Tell us a bit about what's happened, the good and the bad, and what advice you would give to people who are looking to do what you've done and buy HMOs to be managed by someone else remotely.
So again, due diligence is really, really key. So I spent some time interviewing a few letting agents when I started out, because naturally, because of the distance, these guys are going to be the ones who are responsible for management of your properties. So you want to make sure that they're doing it as you would, or as well as you would. So that's really, really important. I guess the biggest thing I would say is don't be afraid to challenge or to validate or to ask. If you've built up a lot of knowledge on HMOs, then you will have a good idea. So be confident in your own ability and in what you do know, and don't be afraid to ask your letting agent or challenge them over stuff. So my experience initially was really, really good. Over the last 6-8 months, I guess, I was experiencing some challenges with my agent in terms of the management and stuff, and therefore decided to recently move, which uncovered some more stuff that I wasn't aware of. I think communication is, if nothing else, communication is absolutely critical. Making sure you're checking in and making sure you can validate that. So regular inspections are really, really important from your letting agent, but also if you're in the area, then go do the inspections with them. They will paint a bit of a picture. They'll all be really spick and span and really, really clean and stuff when you go, and expect that little bit of pinch of salt. But you can never communicate enough. And the important thing is to what I've done with my current letting agent is agree all of that up front, to say, look, there is that remote element, and actually, how about for a transition period, whilst things are moving across, how regularly can we speak? and we agreed to speak half an hour every Friday morning, and that just did no end of good for both them and us. So I knew I had that time, they knew they had that time with me, and we were hardly ever half an hour on those calls. It was a quick check-in, check-out, everything's going fine, any issues, iron them out, until the next week.
That is a brilliant tip, because I think knowing the agent, from the agent side, knowing that they're going to be checking in with you every Friday morning, I think obviously would give that little bit of impetus and that little bit more drive in terms of filling the rooms. Because sometimes the agents who are on the percentage basis rather than the guaranteed basis, there's not so much incentive for them on the room, keeping the rooms full. So I think that's a fantastic tip to go for if you're a remote landlord and you've got multiple properties with a single agent.
Yeah,
Fantastic. And is there anything else that you want to share with us while you're on today that I haven't asked you about already?
No, I guess if there's any questions for the guys that are on, then feel free to ask. And the other thing is I'll be updating progress on the big one, on the big HMO on Instagram. So yeah, make sure you're liking and following on there as things progress.
Milesh Lakhani property, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, if you're on Instagram, do follow Milesh and the big HMO on there. And is there anything else that you said no that you don't want to mention?
No, I can't think of anything that we haven't already covered.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Milesh. It's been great to have you with us, and we look forward to keeping up with how the development carries on. And I'd love you to come back on and talk to us about it, and certainly put some pictures into the Facebook group.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Okay. Well, bye for now then, and see you guys all next week. Bye.
Thanks.